Hello and welcome to the In a Sense channel. Today we are very lucky to be joined by Dr Vassilis Galanos, a lecturer in digital work at the University of Stirling's Management School. Dr Galanos gave a lecture on the topic of degenerative AI and management in higher education and the management of higher education earlier this year, and afterwards Dr. Galanos and I had a very stimulating discussion, which I hope to continue today. So please remember to subscribe to the Inner Sense channel for more information about the science behind inner body awareness and tips for improving your health and well-being. And that just leaves me to say welcome, Vassilis.
Hi everyone, thanks Ian for having me. A real pleasure to be with you today, and glad to be here and to continue the conversation we had a few months ago.
Yes, so we met through academia, through academic channels. After we spoke following your lecture, I realised that there's much more to you than academic research, and you shared to me about your music interests and photography. So maybe if you can just introduce yourself as a whole person, and maybe even some of your sort of practices or meditations type style activities that you do, and then we can dive later into your research.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, probably the most difficult question, to describe one's own self. I guess. Well, I'm presently my formal role is an academic, but what that means to me is that it's probably the best job I could think of that could give me a sort of constant access to knowledge making, knowledge dissemination. My first degree was in librarianship and information science, which was my way of saying, well, that's a way to stay closer to books, eventually. I guess I've developed an interest in photography, I guess, when I was around 18. I started reading more about the philosophy of photography and the relationship between different media and the capturing of events and our relationship to technology. So photography played a huge role in that. When I was, I guess, around 12 or 13 years old, I was very much taken by various occultist ideas. I was interested in magic and different practices of magic, which is an idea I find myself returning to approximately every 10 years. So I found myself being interested in magic again when I was around 21. I'm now 38, and I believe that in the last 5 years, 6 years, I've developed I revived that interest as well. And the interesting thing about this is that every time this interest in occultism or magic revives, you get to see the various things you end up doing with a fresh perspective, and you're able to reconnect certain things. So, for example, once I rediscovered magic and I had become a photographer, I realized many things about the magical properties of photography and what this can do in terms of the power of watching an image, the power of keeping an image with you. That came together with the development of social media. It was around 2006-07 when everyone was starting experimenting with social media, and people were saying, oh, the world is changing because of social media. But apparently, if you look at the history of photography, these conversations have always been there. What else? Yeah, I'm also into music. I guess when I was 15, I had decided that I want to be a rapper, not as a career-oriented rapper, but I found that rap music as a medium allows me to use words in a creative way that I can record and put on some music, sort of musical carpet, and some people might call that spoken word. I prefer to call it rap music just to honor my origins. Or some people might just call it poetry. And then the more I explored and experimented with this medium, I found again that it relates to ancient practices of chanting. If you listen, for example, to Tibetan kind of mantras, very often they sound like a rap song. Or if you're exposed to a DJ set. I've become a DJ. I was a DJ for several years, and coincidentally, I DJ'd again as part of a conference I was organizing last week, and I got that feeling, that sensation again. You know, when you are deciding for the music that other people are listening and they dance to this. This is a very, very kind of shamanic sort of technique towards ecstasy. So there is something about that. I guess a funny story, when when I was 17, I discovered a band from the UK with Pakistani origins called the Asian Dub Foundation.
Oh yes, yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've become a massive fan. Actually, the first day I made my own wage, the money was spent for an Asian Dub Foundation CD, and that was when I was 17. Later on, I became obsessed with their music, buying all their merch and everything as a young student in Greece, in Thessaloniki, where I come from. Long story short, at some point they released an album with unreleased songs. One of them contained a song called Siberian Slang Tang, that included a collaboration with the Siberian band called Yadha. And what they did, they used Siberian throat singing to on top of their kind of trip hop kind of beats, and I became very much fascinated with that sort of musical idiom. Found out that this place in Siberia is called Tuva, so it became my absolute sort of aim that as soon as I graduate, I will go to Tuva for a while. I realized that Tuva was the only place in the world where shamanism is considered to be the main accepted religion.
Wow.
It's not it used to be a country, so this does not feature in many statistics because Tuva is now part of the Russian Federation. So if you examine Russia as a whole, obviously shamanism is a very small percentage. But if you take Tuva, the region, as a separate entity, then most people are sort of mostly affiliated with some kind of shamanic practice. So traveled there, and I read also a lot about shamanism. It did fit very well with my other readings on photography, also information science. So what is information? When we talk about information, how does this transmit? Very often the role of the shaman is to make use of available information and repackage it in a way that is more soothing for example, for somebody who's seeking some kind of cure. Interested a lot in the history of shamanism, how the figure of the shaman eventually became rather marginalized with the development of early science or alternative modes of spirituality and religion, sort of sidelined because of other dominant religions, including Tibetan Buddhism in Tuva, that is the other dominant wave in Siberia.
So with your trip to Siberia, you kindly shared with me some photographs from there. Thinking about that visit now, is there any kind of image or moment that comes to you first from that trip?
Oh, so many. I guess to stick to the theme, to the very loose theme that we have here. It's the day when I met my shaman.
Ah,
I
yes.
would say, um, which is also interesting on a political level. So if you go to Tuva during summer. You might get the sort of invitations to take part in a shamanic ritual. In order to do it, it's very commercialized, right? To get your own shamanic ritual, you might have to pay something like $2,000 or something like that. So this amount of money I would never pay, and also by ideology I wouldn't subscribe to that. So I was always skeptical when I saw it, and I was a bit disillusioned. I thought, maybe that's all about shamanism. All the books I've read talk about shamanism as it used to be, and so on. Now, at some point, I was walking around the capital city of Tuva called Kizil. Um, I was obviously different looking. I had a big, massive dreadlock one then. Back then, I was carrying my backpack. I was obviously not a local. And I was approached by a 20-year-old woman who um, spoke some English and said that the older person accompanying her is a shaman, not like the shamans you will find in these sort of commercial places, but an actual shaman, and he saw something in you. And the guy was indeed dressed up like a regular person, no feathers like the other commercial shamans, no special, I don't know, clothing or anything, just regular clothes. Very gentle and polite person. He gave me a touch on the almost on my back, like on the side of my body, and I was immediately electrified from head to toes. It was a very interesting experience. Now, back to photography. What I've read previously was that shamans abstain from being photographed in all
Ah,
cultures, right? Um, I always carried my camera with me. And that woman invited me to spend the night with a shaman, herself, and her mother in their shared flat. What she explained to me was that she's suffering from very rare condition, health condition, and what they do is that they offer shelter to the shaman, cooking for him, buying him alcoholic drinks because he was really fond of alcoholic drinks. And he's just staying there. He's just occupying one room just to share his energy with her in order to slowly cure her. Probably doing some rituals as well. Um, During that evening, I tried to take a picture of him and he would resist. I obviously respected this, so I didn't want to push any boundaries. And in my mind, this confirmed this theory about photography. Now, some days later, I met the same guy alone. And he invited me to how do you call this, like a play fair, where you have the different kind of games and a Ferris wheel and so on.
okay, yeah, fairground type thing.
Like a fairground, yeah. And he invited me to one of these. I was like, "Wow, what?" Okay. So we went to the entrance. We went to the till. I tried to pay for both of us, and the person on the till said, "You're with a shaman. You don't pay." So
Wow.
that added some confirmation to me that he's a well-known, respected shaman, and that I'm with him. I enter for free. Amazing. He literally took me to all the games. Like he was deep in his 60s, but playful like a child. And he actually invited me to take pictures of him.
Oh, unusual.
It was very unusual, and he didn't speak any English. My mode of communication with him was a double dictionary, a Russian English, English Russian dictionary. So he could point at words. I couldn't figure out with that method why he abstained from it. My interpretation was that perhaps he wanted to appear like a truer shaman to that family, to meet the expectation that photos are not taken. So that was an interesting mystery that kind of helped me say, well, maybe photography is not so much at odds with shamanism. It's just knowing when to use it. Yeah, and the other story, so eventually I invited him to the place I was renting for that month. I stayed in Tuva. I had my various sort of necklaces or whatever charms I've collected during the trip with me. He performed a little ritual, on like a blessing ritual for them, and he saw a book I had of an 18th century occultist called Eliphas Lévi or Lévi. He's was a well-known magician in the 18th century. I really liked his book, and I wanted to get a Russian version of it just for my collection. Famously, that book introduced this idea of a hexagram being the two confronting images of a human. So there's there's upwards looking triangle and a downwards looking one, and each the top and the bottom are heads of a person, and you have the arms holding each other. So the upper part's head is connected to the arms of the downward triangle. Anyway, what I never noted in that image that the shaman helped me note was that in between there were some little lines. And then he pointed to the dictionary and showed me one word: reflection. And I realized that these little lines actually make that image a 3D image, like an image with depth, whereas most people perceive the hexagram as a two-dimensional symbol.
A flat star.
A flat star, exactly. So he said that the reason that the hexagram is reflected is that it's a reflection on the sea. So underneath the surface, you have the rest of the body, which to me, it was a massive revelation that perhaps this idea about the universe being so symmetrical is not entirely true. If we take into consideration this interpretation, perhaps shamanism is there to show us that, under the earth there is an entire other world. Yes, the roots look a little bit like the branches of the tree, but they're not the same. Because there's this tendency to depict the roots of the tree as the branches, but it's not the same. The world is completely different. So that was the one of the most impressive parts of that trip in Tuva. My actual connection to a shaman who gave me a ritual because I bought him a beer, or maybe not because of that. He would do that anyway, maybe, but he was really appreciative of the beer I bought him, and his way of interpreting Western magic. With one instance, he gave me something no other Western magician had ever told me.
What, the electric touch? Is that what
the
you
electric
mean?
touch, obviously, yeah. That was. I mean, I never had the chance to really explain that. I didn't ask about it. For me, that was a sort of initiation ritual. Like, look, I'm knowing my stuff. You have to believe me. Is the sort of kind of introductory point. Yeah.
So and have you? So that was Siberian Tuva shamanism. Have you explored other types of shamanism over the years from other parts of the world?
I haven't had the chance to explore as much as I would like. I had some very brief experiences in New Orleans or New Orleans. Locals say New Orleans, Brits say New Orleans, where I haven't encountered a voodoo practitioner. but I had a very interesting encounter with, well, two interesting encounters actually. It might be a bit of long stories, but so one of them, so famously in New Orleans, one of the most famous magicians is Marie Laveau. She was very active, I think, in the late 19th century. And she's buried in one of the central graveyards. Now, if you go to the center of New Orleans, there's this graveyard, usually populated by tourists, and another three graveyards surrounding that one. One of them, when I visited, was closed for some kind of restoration. Obviously, generally I'm a law-abiding person, but this cemetery really sparked my curiosity. So I felt the urge to jump in and explore. And I found a person there. He would smell like Jack Daniels, and he carried with him a very old kind of lanyard, claiming that he's an official tourist guide in the shut cemetery. And he asked for a tip, and he would give me a tour. So I gave him a tenner, and I said, look, that's yours. Give me your tour. Took me around, showed me a few things. And at some point, he pointed to a very small grave with some scratches on it. And he said that this is the grave of Marie Laveau's sister, who was also a magician. I haven't found any evidence for that. I searched for it. I have never found some evidence that Marie Laveau had a sister who's also been a magician or a voodoo practitioner. And he said that the scratches you see on the grave, I've made those when I was 10 years old or something. And since then, I'm cursed to move around this cemetery and tell people about my story.
Wow. So would you say he was a standard human at that point, or was he kind of just as a spirit?
I have no frame of reference. I know that I could definitely touch him.
Okay, you could touch him.
He smelled like Jack Daniels, but he didn't smell like a zombie. So I believe he was very much alive. But you never know. I mean, how can you tell if somebody's a spirit or not?
Well,
yeah.
Yes, yeah. I'd like to come back to the topic of magic in a while, and magic. The word, any single word can mean lots of different things to different people in different contexts, and so we'll maybe come back to it. And I'd like to ask you, what do you mean by magic? Because you were talking before we started recording this about hype as magic, and we're going to talk about hype as capital, hopefully. But first of all, something that there's lots of hype about at the moment, which is artificial intelligence. Now, you've been studying this for a long time, and I was intrigued by a paper you shared with me on artificial intelligence, and your main sort of claim on that paper, or one of the core ideas, was that AI, the artificial part of AI, doesn't really exist. So in a nutshell, when you say AI doesn't exist, what is the misconception you're trying to kind of dissolve away?
Thank you very much for this question and for honoring my paper by reading it.
I'll share the paper in the or a link to it in the notes.
Absolutely.
As well.
It's open access, so people can find a free copy. So that paper was written, I believe, in 2018 or 2019 when I was a first-year PhD student. It was actually a semester essay I've written, and I received lots of good feedback from my then instructor, now colleague and friend Richard Freeman, who believed in this idea. So I was very much appalled by this idea of artificial intelligence hype, that everyone talks about AI as if it's a thing, as if you can put an AI, as if AI can be plural and singular, like one AI, two AIs. It doesn't make sense. For my early interviews, speaking to people who developed AI in the 60s and the 70s, they said AI is a field. You cannot say put a physics or put a chemistry in this. So there was this debate on whether it's a technology or science. Anyway, I came back to some of my initial readings that had to do with naturalism and constructivism. So naturalism, I mean, obviously, again, many definitions. The one I'm going with is this sort of Renaissance idea that, or even Epicurean, if you want to say so, that nature is the only thing that exists, right? So you cannot create a binary between natural and unnatural. So to say artificial intelligence, that is to make a distinction between something, a type of intelligence that is not made by nature. So there's one argument there. You can
really the word artificial doesn't exist either, because everything in that, by that definition, comes from the natural world. So all things are natural. They may be they may have gone through some process which has changed the way that they're organized, but they are still, the process has been done by a human, so it's still, and humans are natural, so therefore it's still natural. Is that the kind of thing that you're saying?
Exactly, yeah. My main reference for this is I guess an amalgam of two French philosophers. One is called La Métrie, and the other is, well, philosopher and novelist, the Marquis de Sade. So for them, as naturalists, indeed, there's no artificial construct. So what is artificial is the perception of things, or the creation of boundaries. And by artificial, they would mean, the way we exercise our power on other people. So for the Marquis de Sade, he would always use this naturalistic argument to say there is no clear division, for example, by church law. What is prohibited, what isn't. So it's ultimately an argument that instead of some kind of naturalistic determinism, that nature is the ultimate deity controlling us, as this is another type of misconception, this type of naturalism enables freedom of choice, to say there's no specific division, for example, between natural and artificial intelligence. So it's really up to you how you want to use it.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it is an extension of the human intelligence. When we have all these conversations about biases in data sets, that, for example, if you scrape everything from the web and you train a machine like ChatGPT to give you answers on this, it's very likely that if you don't use content moderation, which, by the way, happens in Kenya by OpenAI, people are getting paid $2 an hour to do that very hard type of work, then what ChatGPT will spit out will be misogynistic, homophobic things. If you prompt it a bit, you can get these things out because they are there in the data set. So the artificial intelligence is an extension of the human intelligence. And that brings me to the second part of the argument. When I say that AI does not exist, it's not just this binary between artificial and natural, or nature and nurture, but also intelligence, because the way the word intelligence is used in these sort of mundane uses of the word AI, of the phrase AI, is such that it implies that intelligence is a self-contained thing, that intelligence is somewhere in the brain, which is one of the viable hypotheses. Okay, I'm not trying to discredit that necessarily, but we should also hear to these other approaches that say that intelligence is something that happens in between. So if you think about it, actually, artificial intelligence development was offspring of cybernetic thinking. Indeed, the first people who coined that, one of the first people who coined the term artificial intelligence, Claude Shannon, was a member of the early cybernetics group, right? So,
with Ross, was that with Ross Ashby? Was he one of the
Ross Ashby, Norbert Wiener, John von Neumann, entire history, or the people who created the first sort of machine learning algorithms back in 1946. They were also McCulloch and Pitts. So all these sort of pointed towards a systems theory where intelligence is something rather dispersed. It's not something that you can contain. If you contain it, it will die. If you have a human that does not interact and is boxed, eventually it will die. If you have an artificial intelligence, if you have a computer on its own to run out of electricity, it will die. Right? So intelligence is something that happens in between. It's about the connection. So that's what kind of completes my argument, but it was also my attempt to offer something to the AI community, and sort of enter that's why the paper was presented at a technical conference, instead of a sort of history or sociology of science or technology conference where I usually hang out. Because after that, I started developing a rather historical and sociological understanding of artificial intelligence without really caring about myself shaping the definition. I feel that I've done that with that paper. I've done my 2 cents, but later on, I was interested in how other people use the term as a sociologist, and how historically this has changed for different social, economic reasons, and so on. Yeah.
So that view of intelligence links to kind of the 4E cognitive science. What's coming to mind there after hearing you say that is, I was thinking of a spider and a spider's web. So, a spider's web, you could view that as a technology, and the spider can walk away from it after it's spun its web, and it can be separate from it, but actually it's come through, that you could view it as dead. You could view a spider's web as some kind of dead, sort of like a machine or a Eiffel Tower that's been made by humans, but it's been made by the spiders, but actually it's come through the body of the spider, and it's attached to it needs the environment to kind of string itself to. And it can be used to capture something, but you could view it as dead, or you can view it as natural and alive as well.
Absolutely, and the spider is a very apt example because it reminds me. I mean, on in addition to my interest in shamanism and magic, the other kind of spiritual, inclination I have is towards Zen Buddhism. So with Zen, you have. There was this very popular book in the 70s, Zen and the Art of Archery. And the author, I can't remember the name now, is using the spider as a metaphor for the archer, and says that in order to be a good archer, you need to overcome the division between your body, the bow, the arrow, and the target. And that's what a spider does. A spider so very organically, seamlessly, a seamless web, creates the web without having the intention of capturing an animal. There might be a sort of continuity, an ecological continuity in that, but the spider will not write an instruction manual. It's all wired in the DNA, if you may, or something like that. So it's yeah, I just think it's pretty much the same. You also get cyberneticians talking about this. So people like Maturana and Varela, second order cybernetics, talking about structural coupling. How, for example, certain types of species and certain types of animal species and certain types of vegetable species co-develop in certain ways that are mutually dependent. One cannot exist without the other. Or French philosophers Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari talking about the becoming orchid of the bee and the becoming bee of the orchid. So many people have reached kind of similar conclusions through different pathways, serving different traditions, theoretical, intellectual traditions. But I think that looking at artificial intelligence as in this sort of very Western Cartesian separate thing will not really help us. We need to understand that anything we create is part of ourselves. And we also have the right, I'm not saying that we should give rights to robots or anything like that. This is a very dangerous and probably avoidable idea. But we're also free to question artificial intelligence. One of our creations. If I make my spider web here and it doesn't work, well, I'll try and go make it somewhere else and use a different method. The reason that spiders are making webs for so many years, for so many centuries, is that it worked
Helpful.
well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe AI does not work. Maybe we'll need to think of another mode of expressing our intelligence.
Or a different type of AI, or different. I know there's quite a bit of debate at the moment about the basic assumptions behind some of the AI models. But can we move on to this really interesting idea that you mentioned before, and you said you've recently presented at a conference about hype. So we talked a little bit previously about hype as capital. So sometimes it's, hype in common language, we think of it as just kind of noise. There's a lot of hype around this and it's a bit of a fad and it's going to come and go. How do you relate hype to capital?
Okay, well, a huge question, and unfortunately, I've been presenting on these very recently. So I'm part of an international network of researchers and artists. We label ourselves the Hype Studies network or group or organization. We haven't decided on this. We've got a website, hypestudies.org, where we collect resources about, like, mostly academic, but not only, articles about hype, about the study of hype. Hype wasn't my original intention to study during my PhD, but it came up as part of my interviews. Many of my interviewees, AI practical experts who code, who have developed these systems, said that very often when people talk about AI, they mean the AI hype, but this is not really the case, right? So that's closer to what you're talking about in terms of noise. Then having conversations with my supervisor, Robin Williams, who has written about hype actually some 15 years ago, and now he has a new forthcoming book coming out on the topic. We had this conversation that hype actually does things. It mobilizes resources. It has very tangible effects, even financial effects, decision-making effects, because. I had this conversation earlier today about a qualitative analysis software called NVivo, which I hate to use in my research. I've never used that. Many people, if you make a PhD or if you are a qualitative researcher, will have the expectation that you're using some kind of software like that, and there is hype about it, that you have to do it. This kind of fear of missing out, and very often people uncritically adopt a technology or feel the urge to adopt and invest in it because there's hype around it. Now, the closer you look at it, you see that hype is very often manufactured. And I'm not saying that in a weird conspiratorial way. There are business analysts, such as the Gartner organization, who produce tools such as the Hype Cycle. So they recommend that companies invest early on in these technologies. What previous researchers had found was that by doing that, they create a self-fulfilling prophecy. They don't have any real measurements to say whether new technologies is worth the hype, but they create the hype because of their hype cycles. So then people are like, well, that company said so, so therefore I have to adopt. The generative AI case is a very obvious one where we had no evidence that the technology is good at all, but everyone is now trying to create a version of it. In higher education, we see more and more. So Canvas, for example, a very a well-known sort of virtual learning environment.
I've spent most of my morning using Canvas.
So very well known for educators, virtual learning environment. Now they have a deal with OpenAI to introduce ChatGPT-like features on Canvas, and people are passively accepting that. Whereas it's now 3 years after the introduction, the launching of ChatGPT, that we have sort of maturity to say, actually, it's not that good. It's not as good as people claim to be. It makes all these mistakes. And if you make content moderation sufficiently good, then it doesn't give you the results you're looking for. So then that means lots of financial thing. But when I'm talking about hype as capital, this is not what I'm talking about. I've spent the last year of my life reading Karl Marx's The Capital, and his understanding of money is a very fluid one. It became apparent to me while reading the book that money itself is an ecology of metaphors about fluidity. So currency is like water currency, like a water current. A bank is like a river bank, right? A reserve is a natural reserve. So all these are metaphors coming from nature, and money is the thing that you can exchange based on the value it has, and this is all very fluid, right? So Marx is not contemplating, but writing about the establishment of gold as a type, as a way to measure value, as an agreed upon way to measure value. But in his time, people have been debating that on whether we should use that or not. And at his time, he's contemplating as the new forthcoming, hyped, if you may, thing, the introduction of credit systems. It was something very new. So when he's describing credit, he is talking about it as sort of promissory notes. So these are the notes that the bank is giving you and says, look, you don't have this amount of money in gold, but I, as a bank, trust you to build up your business, to do your investments and so on, but you will take these promissory notes. This is credit. You need to invest and you need to return some actual money back to me in order to do that. Now, I'm taking that idea and I'm saying that hype is informal credit. It has its tangible material instantiations. So with credit, you had a sort of a paper document signed by the bank. Here you have YouTube videos by tech enthusiasts who say, yeah, this is the way to use this technology. You've got all these companies. You've got informal conversations about, hey, did you learn how to use this? Or you're going to be left behind.
Collectively, there's a collective effervescence around AI, which then more people, more investors will then offer their promissory notes into the technology. Is that the idea that the hype or the collective excitement about the technology means that more people are going to bet on, more investors are going to bet that it will pay off in the future?
Exactly. And I guess what is important here is that it becomes a very informal currency. I'm not talking about a parallel currency like a cryptocurrency or something, but it becomes a currency. So the more people are associated with that hype and they're considered to be experts, they can create expectations about that hype. So they're considered to be more credible. If somebody is able or abiding by certain expectations, it's very likely they will be considered an expert in that field. And there is a point, I think, where hype about something becomes the final object of discussion rather than the technical capability. So AI has, for example, now become, or quantum have become topics of interest that we discuss, but we have no real evidence of their value. So it's mostly discussions about how we're going to react to AI, how should we invest in AI. So
And
so high, so
yes,
high,
and
yeah.
sorry, so just to interrupt, the what was coming to my mind then, which you say no evidence of the value, but there is I can see a catch in there where the evidence, where to reinforce that self-fulfilling prophecy, and that the evidence is often provided in monetary terms, so it will save a business X amount of money. So when the technology starts to indicate that it could save a business some money, let's say cut back on customer service staff, then they're like, oh, okay, that it's true, but actually we're only looking at one metric there. We're only looking at the financial metric to justify the investment. We're not looking at what other measures of health or life or wealth on planet Earth might also be impacted by the technology. We're looking at it in
Yeah,
just in one form of economic efficiency or financial
absolutely.
efficiency.
And that's again an extension of this sort of isolationist
Hmm.
kind of ideology that dominates these debates. You see one sector or one company or one sector within the company, one specialization, being affected, but you don't see the company as a whole or the world as a whole.
Hmm.
And what is particularly interesting in hype is that with typical money you have a standard way of measurement, which is, for example, money, paper notes or coins, or gold, or any kind of Pokemon cards, right? You have a
Hmm.
standard way of measuring it. With hype, what is interesting is that the content of the hype changes. So you might be investing on this technology based on potential financial gain, but then there will be a new hype as soon as people will be disillusioned about something, or many parallel hypes that
Hmm.
will put the investor or the decision maker in this sort of very awkward position. Do I need to now invest in quantum technologies to
Hmm.
encrypt my digital presence, or do I
Hmm.
need to invest in AI technologies to improve or sack some of my employees and win some money in this way?
Hmm.
And usually that's how this attention economy behind the hype actually operates, by capitalizing on short attention spans
Hmm.
and showing very bright lights
Hmm.
to attract attention. Then investment becomes sort of dispersed itself. And most people are caught in this sort of multiple webs of hype. There is no standard way to measure the disillusionment of a technology. That's part of my, the extension of my AI does not exist argument through the historical research, where, for example, I've found in my PhD that when people lost faith in AI in the early 70s because those who promised grandiose results in the 60s were incapable of delivering these promises. In fear of losing their jobs, AI specialists stopped calling what they do AI, but they gave it other names. So for 10 years, you would call the exact same technologies, technological configurations, knowledge-based expert systems.
Oh, okay.
Right? Or if you look at how the internet works and how algorithms work, like the algorithmic society, right? So social media giving you tailorized content, tailor-made content because of your own interaction with it. Well, under certain definitions, this is AI. It's just that when these social media were popular, what was hyped was algorithms, Web 2.0, this idea of community-driven, user-driven online innovation. But AI was effectively one of the scientific fields that shaped this thing. Like online search was actually heuristics was an AI kind of domain in the 50s and the 60s. And interestingly, the hype about Web 2.0 led into the renaissance of some ancient AI algorithms from the 80s that back then they were considered doomed to fail because people said you will never get enough data to do it, you will never get enough computational power. Well, with the Moore's law, the self-fulfilling prophecy was created so that more computational power became available through the extraction of natural resources. With this hyped ideal of the web being a communitarian space for people to share their views, their opinions, we gathered the data. People willingly gave away their data on public fora, on social media, and so on, shared their pictures, their children's pictures, and everything. So we have subjected this entire world into digital analysis. And then the new hype of AI arose again, which, again, to return to the capital, again, Marx has a very specific chapter devoted to the usage of waste. So capital as waste and waste as capital. So where you get the leftovers of manufactories, and the capitalist has the duty to find new ways to make use of them and extract more money out of this.
I heard someone the other day saying exchanging the word waste for surplus. So say, because waste has a negative connotation, whereas I guess a capitalist will see it as a surplus to be exploited to generate more capital.
Exactly. So to put that into perspective with the AI example, have you ever heard of the term big data? You probably have.
Yes.
So big data was very, very much hyped. Before that, right before big data were hyped, there was a brief moment in time when a very interesting kind of responsible hype was around. This idea of the right to be forgotten. So between 2006 and 2009, I must say, because of all the social media hype, people would post pictures online all the time. So Facebook, everything. Yeah, did I go to Paris? I'll need to post the Eiffel Tower. So we had millions of images of the same thing from a different perspective on our social media, and very limited natural resources to hold these online, data centers and so on, right? It was extremely expensive. So people started thinking that they have been creating some kind of hype to say, hey, can we reduce that? Can we actually delete things? And they made cases where the preservation of things online was actually harmful. So, for example, if somebody was a convict and had a very unique name, and that name was featured on a newspaper that is online, a future employer, after the end of the conviction, might Google the name of that person and find that they have been prosecuted, and that would mean that that person doesn't have a second chance in life because of all the biases. So that's how 5 years later the European Union introduced the right to be forgotten and so on. It's always slow, but people said perhaps we should really consider reducing what we do. Very, very quick. What happened was that the people so these people who have developed these algorithms in the 80s and have now become leaders of their own laboratories realize that there is value there. You can use all these data to extract patterns. So in 2009, there was lots of debate on pattern recognition, which was the sort of one of the holy grails in the 1980s AI, even before, even in the 50s and 60s. But in the 80s, there was a kind of renaissance, an attempt, first attempt failed. Okay, then back again. Wait until you have all this data. So through different hype cycles, you get sufficient waste. So lots of data on the web, you don't know what to do with them. And then big companies come and say, oh, we can call the waste big data. And we need to invest in big data and exploit it.
Get more
and now we've got
predictive power from it. Yeah.
Exactly. And predictive power, that was step one. Now you've got generative AI, so much data that you can actually create new versions, rearrangements of it. So perhaps speak to the early sort of targets of artificial intelligence, something that looks like a human and acts like a human. And so for many people, it must be a human, but it's not.
Fascinating stuff. There's so many routes I could go down with this topic. I'd like to bring it back to magic, and because you mentioned at the conference you were making links between hype and magic, if I understood you. So in this context, what does magic mean to you?
Okay, so I mean, like you said earlier, many definitions for many things. The way I understand magic is that sort of intellectual domain that, as opposed, for example, to the rationality of stereotypical science, it enables a closer understanding of what happens in the realm of imagination, or in the realm of the unconscious, quite neighboring to fields such as psychoanalysis, sort of closer to things like intuition. It's not necessarily opposed to science. Actually, science and magic have been together for many years, but it's a way to get in closer contact with imagination and whatever that might entail. So conducting rituals, for example, you eventually imagine certain things. Right, you bring certain images to your mind. It's up to your belief whether you're creating those images or if these images come to you. But that's exactly it. You have to imagine. In any event, you have to construct your thinking about it and believe in whether you're creating those images or they come from somewhere else, right? With it has certain things that are associated with it, such as spells or magic words. Again, more mundane rituals, things you repeat every day. And according to you, they serve a certain purpose. For example, we say hello when we greet somebody. That's a ritual. Right? It's not explained by any scientific kind of, unless you count communication theory as a scientific domain, which I do. Then it's not explained by any of the natural sciences, right? So these kind of rituals become part of our everyday life. So this is the entry point to look at magic practices historically as a viable source of inspiration for what we do. When it comes to, I guess another thing to say is that in the West, and although I still haven't found any practical evidence for that, there is a division between so-called white and black magic, typically associated with well-intended and ill-intended magic. And my belief is that the people who have coined these sort of binaries have themselves been racist, because I see no other reason to do that. And any magician or practitioner of magic will be able to tell you that even if you're very well intended in your magical practice, there might be unintended negative consequences, or that even if you really want to harm somebody, you
There might
might
be a
get
silver lining to the cloud.
exactly. So you might serve a greater purpose, right?
Yes, yeah.
So
So
going to
we've had a researcher who wrote a book called Ritual. He's a Greek researcher called Dimitris Xygalatas. I don't know if you've come across him. He studies ritualistic practices and ceremonies and religious practices as well. I can't recall him talking lots about magic, but I'm suspecting there's a lot of overlap with what we're talking about here, with the kind of intentional behavior that's done either individually or collectively to influence the future in a way that doesn't. There's not always a clear kind of causal mechanism that can be understood, but still, people do these practices, and they're effective. They have an efficacy high. So yeah, that's I'm seeing some parallels here with his work and what you're talking about.
So this is a very interesting. I probably need to meet that person and read their work. I mean, Ritual again further connects to cybernetics. One of my favorite cybernetic theoreticians, Gregory Bateson, has written a lot about the overlaps, the semantic overlaps between ritual, ritual or religion, play, and humor, and schizophrenia. Where you have a literal and a metaphorical meaning intersecting, sometimes being confused, sometimes being one and the same. So rituals enable us to enter a metaphorical world and transfer metaphor. The word metaphor literally means to transfer something. So it's this sort of transference where you create an imaginary world where we agree that, for example, this wine is blood, right? In humor, when or in play, when two dogs are biting each other for reasons of play, they create an imaginary environment where war is happening. So it's as if you're preparing for the potential of war. And in schizophrenia, the I guess troubling aspect is when the imaginary world is being taken as the real world. But sometimes if you learn to control it, that's the aspect of ritual, is that you can use the metaphor in the sort of everyday circumstances. That's, to put it in a very cliche way, that's why we need a little bit of magic in our daily lives. Or
Yes,
from an explanatory point of view, that's why so many people go to the movies, and that's why films, like science fiction or things like Harry Potter and so on are so popular, because people have the desire to express themselves in some such ways.
And I often think we scientists often think of themselves as, purely rational, logical thinkers, but if that was the case, there would be no curiosity or no mystery driving their work. So if it's the unknown, it's the kind of the magical that we want to understand better that drives a lot of
drives our fantasies and motivates us. I mean, and that's exactly how hype is created as well. And I'll return to that in a minute. I want to say a little bit on what you said about causality and the sort of less causal relationships. I think that the type of magic traditions I have been following, they try to disambiguate this sort of misconception about causality not being part of magic. What they might say is that some of the causal inferences are not directly visible. So it's metaphysics in the ancient Greek way of talking about it, that there are certain things that are not yet explained, right? And that if you focus a lot, for example, if you conduct this ritual and you do it every day, you might be able to understand certain things over a few years. A main principle in magic is the motto, if you may, solve et coagula, which is Latin for dissolve and coagulate. So break things in parts, analyze, and then synthesize or compute, put together. So magic is a word. To perform magic, you need to break things into parts in order to understand them, and then reassemble them in your preferred way. In your preferred manner. That's the tradition I have been following. And hype, the way hype is constructed, is very much similar. So those who intentionally construct hype, they do their market analysis. They do understand who my audiences are. What kind of stakeholders and shareholders I have around me, and how can I influence them using certain magical words, such as I'm sure this is going to happen.
Freedom or whatever.
Freedom,
yes,
democracy, liberty, AI, intelligence, connection.
It is an art that you understand the process of it, and as you said, you then coagulate it together around something that is
absolutely
your goal, whatever your goal is in that moment.
And the word art is also deeply associated with magic. So art and craft, another huge debate with technique and art and craft and what is what. But again, very often many people, when they talk about magic, they refer to the craft or the art, the higher art. So again, there is something there. So that's something we really discuss in the hype studies group, is can you create responsible hype? Is hype evil all along? Can you hype certain things for certain to reach certain results? And obviously, many people will counteract and say, well, that's what many of the hype people have already done. They started with good intentions. Right? And they tried to figure out how to create some kind of responsible hype, but eventually they were co-opted, and then they served a malevolent purpose, or the hype kind of went out of control and had some negative results.
Yes, or gets captured by the bottom line of needing to make a profit or something like that. Fascinating. Vassilis, you've been super generous with your time, and we've gone over a little bit. Where can people find out more about your work? I'll include links in the bottom of this video.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me. I'm available on pretty much everything. I guess the standard way to approach me and to get, I guess, most updates about what I do on the intellectual sphere is my institutional website. So if you just search my name, Vassilis Galanos, and Stirling, you will find my website. My email is, my inbox is always open open for conversation. So vassilis.galanos@stir.ac.uk. I am on various dubious platforms such as LinkedIn, Instagram, supporting Blue Sky. I'm on Mastodon. I'm on various. I'm on Flickr as a photographer. If you still use Flickr, I still pay my annual subscription to it, and I've got lots of photography there. Yeah.
I'll share some of those, the ones that you've shared with me before, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thank you very much, and I'd like to stay in contact both to see how your research continues, but also just to carry on this conversation. Hopefully we can have a part 2 at some point.
Absolutely, and it will be a real pleasure, because I think we've only scratched a little bit of the surface. It has been a pleasure,
agree.
Ian. Thank you for having me. Thanks to everyone who are listening or watching this video.
Thank you, and take care.
Take care. Bye.